In the last class, we were discussing opportunity cost and trade-offs. And so we had left off, we had just finished the Office series where we had looked at Pretzel Day and discussed the trade-offs of waiting in line for a pretzel and or going to work. And so now we're going to talk about a concept called the law of diminishing marginal utility. And so I know that sounds like a lot, but for this class, utility is going to mean satisfaction. And as you consume more of something, the additional satisfaction that you receive eventually starts to decrease. So for example, you eat one cookie and it tastes so good. That first bite of the cookie, you're like, oh, this is so delicious. And then you eat a second bite and it's still satisfying, but it's not quite as satisfying as that very first bite. By the time you get to the third cookie, it's definitely not near as satisfying, right? Definitely not as much satisfaction the more cookies that you eat, and eventually you decide that you're done eating cookies. Like there's just no more satisfaction that you can get from eating that cookie today. So if you look at Disneyland's pricing strategy, you can actually see the law of diminishing marginal utility illustrated here. So a one-day pass is $124, 2 days is $199, 3 days is $270, and 4 days is $290. So it definitely is more expensive every day, but the difference between a one-day and a 2-day ticket is $75. But if you go from the 3-day ticket to the 4-day ticket, it's only $20. And that's because the more days that people are in the park, the less satisfying it is. And so they actually have to decrease the price, the difference between those prices, as a way of encouraging people to come for days 3 and day 4. Again, here you can see it again with Disneyland, different prices. So 3, 4, 5-day tickets, they also add that magic morning. And so you can see this is per day, right? So they actually show you that, like, if you go for 2 days, it's $105 a day. But if you go for 5 days, it's only $64 a day. And again, that's a way of encouraging people to come for those additional days because it's not as satisfying the longer that you're there. So in economics, again, when we're thinking like an economist, that term marginal is going to mean additional. So a marginal utility, additional marginal utility, like that, the satisfaction you get from each additional item. Okay, so we do something called marginal analysis, where we think at the margin, we think based on increments. Okay, so for example, you go to the mall, you consider the additional benefit and the additional cost. Okay, once you get to the mall, you continue to use marginal analysis when you shop, you buy food, you talk to friends. Your marginal benefits and costs can quickly change because you're analyzing them every second. What if your ex-girlfriend shows up? Do you still want to be at the mall? So the point is that you'll continue to do something as long as the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. And so again, I like to use the example of hitting snooze in the morning, right? So, the first time you hit snooze, there's a marginal benefit and a marginal cost. And if you've hit snooze, you've decided that the benefit outweighs the cost. What happens when the alarm goes off the second time? Okay, do you hit snooze or do you go ahead and get up? Well, if you feel like the cost exceeds the benefit, then you get up. Or if you've decided that the benefit of hitting snooze is greater, then you're going to hit snooze the second time, and you're going to keep hitting snooze until those additional times, right? Marginal utility. You're going to continue to hit snooze every time until you decide that the cost outweighs the benefit of hitting snooze. So here's an example of going to the movies. So the first time that you go and watch a movie at the movie theater, it costs you $10 for the ticket, but you feel like you got a lot of benefit, right? Like obviously the benefit outweighed the cost, which was why you chose to go to the movie. So the benefit is $30, whereas the cost is only $10. Well, what happens if the next weekend your friend comes to you and says, hey, I really want to go see this movie. Will you go with me? and you're like, you know what, it was such a phenomenal movie, yes, I will go the second time, because to me, the benefit still outweighs the cost, okay? And so the benefit's gonna be $15, whereas the cost is gonna be $10. What happens if another friend wants to go to the same movie? And that would mean it's the third time you've seen the same movie at the movie theater. Well, in this particular instance, okay, going from the second time to the third time, we're losing utility, we're losing benefit. And so the benefit's only going to be $5, but the cost is going to be $10. And so in this particular case, you would not go the third time, because the satisfaction, the benefit, is not greater than the cost. And so the reason that we look at that incremental, that marginal utility, is because this tells us that this third time is not beneficial to us. If we were to look at total benefit versus total cost, okay, 30 plus 15 plus 5 is 50, whereas the cost, 10 plus 10 plus 10, if you're looking at just the totals, you would say, well, your benefit still outweighs your cost. You should still go ahead and do that. But that's actually not the case, because that individual, that marginal utility has decreased enough that the benefit no longer outweighs the cost. So would you see the movie 3 times? The answer is no. So our 5 key economic assumptions is that we have unlimited wants but limited resources. This is known as scarcity. Due to scarcity, we have to make choices, and every choice has a cost, which is a trade-off. Everyone's goal is to make choices that maximize their satisfaction, so everybody acts in their own self-interest. Everybody makes decisions by comparing the marginal benefits and the marginal costs of every choice. And real-life situations can be explained and analyzed through simplified models and graphs. So when we look at the benefits and costs on a graph, we're going to assume that you're buying slices of pizza at a sporting event. And so this is our marginal benefit, right? And so the more pizza that we buy, okay, the lower our benefit, okay? So each slice of pizza gives you less and less additional benefit or utility. So here's our cost, right? And the more slices of pizza that we buy, the higher our overall cost is, okay? So right here is what we call the equilibrium point, and we'll get to that eventually. But why is 5 slices the optimal amount? Well, that's because this is the point where things start to tip. If we were to buy an additional slice of pizza and go from 5 slices to 6 slices, well, here's where our cost exceeds our benefit, okay? And over here, our benefit still exceeds the cost. So we would still continue to buy slices of pizza until we hit that tipping point. So at 3 slices, okay, again, the cost is lower than the benefit, so we buy the 3rd slice. At 7 slices, the cost is higher than the benefit. That's too much. 5 is perfect, okay? So remember that economics is not a science. It's what we call a social science. And that's because we're constantly coming up with new theories, new ideas as a way of explaining the different things that are happening in our economy all around us.